Hey there! Glad you've joined us today for a virtual tour of the Utah Women's History Memorial that was just installed on the grounds of the state capitol. It was created by Kelsey Harrison and Jason Manley, and the name of the memorial is A Path Forward. It honors the tens of thousands of Utah women who worked to expand voting rights so that more people had access to the ballot in our state and in our nation. Better Days 2020 commissioned this memorial as a gift to the state of Utah. Want to take a closer look? Let's go! The memorial stands outside Council Hall, where Utah women citizens like Sarah Young became the first women in the United States to vote under an equal suffrage law in February 1870. That's why you'll see two footsteps with Seraph's name and the year 1870 on them as you enter the memorial. But 17 years later, the federal government passed a law that prohibited any woman in Utah from voting as part of their efforts to end the practice of polygamy. Utah women started a movement to get their right to vote back once Utah became a state. These chairs look just like the chairs in the city and county building where our state constitution was written in 1895. In that constitution, it states, "The rights of citizens of the state of Utah to vote and hold office shall not be denied on account of sex. Both male and female citizens shall enjoy equally all civil, political, and religious rights and privileges." Female citizens could once again vote in Utah. At the turn of the 20th century, even though women citizens could vote in local and national elections in Utah and a few other states, many thousands of women in our country could not. For many white women, this was only because of their gender, but Black, Indigenous, and people of color faced additional discrimination because of their citizenship, race, education, or income level. The doorways you see behind me represent important chapters in the history of how voting rights expanded throughout the 20th century. Each doorway is a bit wider than the previous one, and the brick pathway you walk on also expands as you go through. Utah women joined national organizations and movements that influenced the expansion of voting rights in our country. This first doorway commemorates the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Utah women were part of the national movement to add this amendment to our governing document. When it was ratified in 1920, it was the largest enfranchisement of Americans in U.S. history. As we continue through the memorial, you'll see three more doorways. Like I said, overcoming gender discrimination in voting was only one hurdle of many for Black, Indigenous people of color here in Utah and in the nation. This next doorway commemorates the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924. This act marked a broad expansion of citizenship rights for Indigenous people. The state of Utah, however, did not allow full voting rights to Indigenous women and men living on federal reservation land until 1957. Continuing on, we come to the doorway that represents the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952. This act adjusted immigration restrictions from Asian countries and opened up citizenship opportunities for women and men who were born in Asian countries and emigrated to the United States. The last doorway in the memorial commemorates the Voting Rights Act of 1965. This landmark piece of voting rights legislation made it illegal to discriminate against a person's voting rights based on their race or ethnicity. Practices like poll taxes and literacy tests were no longer legal ways to determine if someone had the right to vote. This had the effect of enfranchising thousands of Americans, particularly Black women and men in the South. An extension of the Voting Rights Act that was passed in 1975 prohibited discrimination due to language barriers. Voter registration materials could now be translated into languages other than English, thus expanding voting rights even further for Latino, Indigenous, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. As we come to the end of the memorial, there's still one more part left, the remainder of the ever-expanding path forward. This part of the memorial brings us to the present day, to our time. It's perfectly fitting that the exit of the memorial faces the Utah State Capitol, where public policy is debated and established today. By learning about the past, we hope you're inspired to add your voice to the voices of the women represented in this memorial, to continue to work to address the needs you see in your community. It's our Utah heritage to remember that Utah women lead